advantage of the opportunity. But right now is about right now.
The Plan B, Ohio State Buckeyes.
Give everything you got in your heart to this place.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rushing the Field, weekly, soon to be twice weekly podcast from NBC Sports. I'm Nicole Auerbach, joined by my pal Jacob Hester, LSU legend, SiriusXM mainstay. He's filling in for Joshua Perry this week, who had more important things to do, aka the birth of his daughter. So very excited, and congratulations to the Perrys on their new addition. So we'll have Joshua back soon enough. Football season's here, so he's going to be working through that newborn life, which Hester, you have a lot of children. You have worked through all phases of childhood in your family.
Yes. Yeah, I always like to say, husband to Katie, father to many, as I will try to, pronounce myself, because we have five. We have five kiddos. We have like every age. Like when we're out and about and people are talking about, hey, this age group, that age group, they kind of look at me. You're like, well, you've got one in each. Kind of give us the breakdown there. So yeah, congratulations to Joshua. That's awesome. Not a better day.
Yes. And he's got a boy and a girl. Took you guys a lot of tries to get a girl. But you understand.
I get it now. I absolutely get it. She runs our household. Yeah. We had to wait until the 5th, but yeah, we got baby girl now.
Oh, I love that. I love that she's running the household.
Oh, without question.
We gotta start running the show because we have so much we're gonna get into. Hester, I appreciate you filling in here because we've got to preview the SEC, the Big 12. We're also gonna hit on the non-P5 teams that intrigue us, and we're gonna start with some news and notes as well because we were talking about quarterback battles and waiting on decisions. We got one from Notre Dame. That was the last big one that's outstanding because we're expecting Michigan to name Bryce Underwood their starting quarterback. It's CJ Carr. Now, Hester, this is a little bit surprising because the way the local media was covering camp, it seemed like Kenny Minchie was in the lead or certainly had a very good chance to earn the starting quarterback job. Notre Dame goes with CJ Carr, grandson of Lloyd Carr. Your reaction to this decision?
It is one of those deals where the whole time we thought it was CJ Carr, but then there was like that 11th hour. Well, wait a minute, it's not going to be CJ Carr. And then we all kind of believed it. And that's really a lot of quarterback battles will kind of go like that. We think we know who the starter is going to be, but it's like, the coach hasn't named a starter for a reason. So he probably saw a flash and he's like, well, I'm going to hold off on naming Carr the starting quarterback there. But ultimately, that's the guy that we all thought, like, if we go back 3-4 months, that's the guy. And for the first time in a long time, Notre Dame didn't go into the transfer portal and get a 1-year rental because they felt like they had their guy in CJ Carr. And so it was expected, certainly like even 6 weeks ago. But then you had that 11th hour. Well, maybe it's not going to be. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at the totality of the quarterback battle, he's probably the best choice and probably the right choice just because he led for so long.
Correct. And I think leadership was clearly an important factor here. So that's going to be huge. That was something back when I was in South Bend for Pro Day. Marcus Freeman was talking about that, about like they lost a ton of leadership off of last year's team, veteran guys. And you need that to show up in a lot of positions. But when you have a quarterback competition, you don't know who the guy is for a long time either. And you need leadership at that position. And then again, I think, people will be wondering about, kind of his decisions, turnovers, things that were issues at times during scrimmages, but he's walking into a couple big games right out of the gate for Notre Dame. That game against Miami, so much questions because you got Carson Beck making his debut for the Canes as well. So that's right around the corner. Excited for that. Something that's not maybe around the corner is Arch Manning and the NFL. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, and Archie, his grandfather, said, I haven't talked to Arch, but I expect him to be back here at Texas next year. I don't think he's going to go early to the NFL. Listen, he's not even been the full-time starter yet. We don't know what the season's going to entail for him. But Arch was kind of like, all right, like he called me or texted me. He apologized. I don't know where he got it from. I'm taking it day by day. So it feels like maybe that's still on the table if he has some sort of Heisman caliber season. But I guess it could go either way. I mean, people thought Peyton was going to go to the NFL and that he, had nothing left to accomplish, and he came back. So I guess it's still kind of TBD for Arch.
Yeah, no, I guess the Mannings, like they've always kind of played out their career, right? They've stayed and they've tried to win national championships, SEC championships. And so it wouldn't be shocking. It absolutely would kind of be on par with what the Mannings kind of do. And so, you want to make sure that you're ready. And also, like, who has the number 1 pick? Let's not forget that, my Bolts, right? Eli said no to them back in the day, and that's how they ended up with Phillip Rivers. And so, like, if the team that has the number 1 pick, and Arch has had the kind of year that maybe a lot of us think he can have, and he is in line to be the number 1 pick, maybe that has to do with it. So, but I will say this. Arch did tell us that Archie Manning texts him every morning something. So they've talked for sure. So I know they have talked. He said at SEC Media Days, we at least text back and forth every day.
Yeah, that was my favorite moment from SEC Media Days when we talked to Arch and he was telling us like the advice he got for the day, and that Archie signs all of his text messages when he texts the grandkids. It's like, yes, we have you saved. Like we know who these texts are coming from. So good. One other quick note before we get into our previews. The CFP put out a couple of tweaks to selection committee protocols. Now, we have heard the SEC clamoring all offseason for more credit for strength of schedule, for saying that they don't think the selection committee is necessarily giving teams their due for that. The CFP staff decided to address that by tweaking their strength of schedule metrics, but also adding a strength of record metric. This quote rewards teams defeating high quality opponents while minimizing the penalty for losing to such a team. They'll have minimal reward for defeating a lower quality opponent and a greater penalty for losing to a lower quality opponent. Is this going to make a difference? Like, I mean, I don't know that people necessarily are going to feel better about the committee knowing that they have another metric. But I know the SEC, like, this stuff matters. They want credit for how difficult it is to get through that schedule.
Yeah, and we talk about this all the time. So you and I, we talk every sport. Like when we're on Sirius XM, we talk every single sport, right? And we talk about it in basketball. What do we always talk about? We talk about the net, and we talk about all these different metrics. College baseball, college softball, right? Sports that I love. We talk about the RPI all the time. We talk about Ken Palm in basketball. It is wild to me that we don't have something in college football that we can use as that. Now, I'm not saying it's how you rank the teams based off of it, but it needs to be something that we can have. Hey, look at where they're at in this standing, that we all kind of, this metric that we all agree on. And that way we can have those conversations, because these conferences are massive now. These conferences are so big that even in the same conference, your schedule can be completely different. Look at Missouri's schedule and look at Oklahoma's schedule. Look at Texas' schedule and look at Florida's schedule. They're all in the same conference, but because of the way the rotation is, the way the league office set it up, they're not created the same. And so used to, like, kind of aging myself here, there's 12 teams in the SEC. Like, you had a better idea because you had a rotation. You had one opponent that was I played in the West, and we played Florida out of the East. The other opponent would rotate, but everybody ended up eventually playing everybody. And now you just don't get that. And so it's even harder to come up with that metric that we use within these same conferences. Big Ten, same situation. We have these massive, massive conferences. And now it's like, okay, well, when you spin the wheel, do you find it, Missouri schedule, or do you find it to have Oklahoma schedule? Oklahoma can be a really good football team this year, but they might be 7-5 because they've got one of the toughest schedules in the country. So it's getting harder and harder to come up with that metric that we all kind of clamor for.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because even within conferences, you're not able to necessarily evaluate this. And then you go out of them and there's not enough data points because you don't have enough crossover games between the conferences, because there's only a few non-conference games for each team. So like, that's why people tell you there's not a really good, reliable strength of schedule metric for college football. You just like, you're not going to get one. So I know we all like hyper fixate on it, and the idea maybe strength of record is going to be better than that, but I don't think we're ever going to have a good strength of schedule one, because there's just not enough games. And I mean, if the SEC and the Big Ten maybe did that challenge that we know they've been bandied about, that would certainly help. And I think it would help our perceptions of like the top, middle, and bottom of all of those leagues. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see how this operates, or if there's a little more trust in the selection committee with it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would love to have some kind of a challenge there, because it's like, hey, these schools are going to play these schools every year. We're going to keep it on a rotation. You would have such a better idea of how good a league is. We get it in basketball, like we get it in January, and it's incredible, because once we get to tournament time and we see what the selection committee does, we're like, hey, man, the SEC, they went whatever against the ACC. The Big Ten went whatever against the Big 12. And you have that metric. It absolutely does, because they do a really nice job of kind of pairing, okay, this is like the 7th team in this league. Let's put them against the 8th team in this league. And so it really ends up playing out where you get a better idea of how strong your conference is. Like for bowl games, well, that's after the season. But if we had it in the week 3, let's call it week 3, right? If you want to play directional school U, I don't like that, but maybe you do. Maybe you play those games early. Week 3, you play the Big Ten, SEC, whoever it ends up being, and then you get into your conference schedule. But hey, this year, this league went whatever the record is against that league, and we would have a much better idea of how strong the conference is. And I think week 3, by the time you get to that point, if you're starting a new quarterback, if you've got a new offensive coordinator, whatever, you have some of those kinks already kind of knocked out before you get to that point. So you can't say, well, it's the first game of the year. So week 3 to me makes a lot of sense.
I would love this so much. And then you just leave it open, if you're going to be home or away, and you could decide these matchups year to year. Yep. So, you don't have to decide this 5-10 years down the road. I am such a proponent of this. I hope college football eventually gets to something like this.
The COVID year showed us one thing, and we don't ever want to relive that year, but it did show us one thing. We can schedule a game between BYU and Coastal Carolina the week of, play it, and everything's fine. We don't have to have.
They got there.
Hey, in 2036, this team's going to go travel there, and in 2039, they're going to return the trip. Like we played Arizona State when I was at LSU in 2005. And that return trip, I think, is still yet to be played. Like it's on the schedule for 6 years from now or something like that. Like we don't have to do that. Like it's cool to have a matchup that we can say, hey, that's coming in the future. I get it. But we can do this thing 18 months out. Maybe that's the timeline. You don't have to do it 7 years out.
Preach. Okay, let's talk about some of the top teams that we do know their schedules. We've hit on a couple of these teams about how SEC schedules, the way that rotations fall, that it's going to determine the future for some of these teams. But let's look at the top contenders to win the SEC. These are the teams that are going to be favorites to win it all, certainly to get into the CFP. There's a couple obvious ones. Texas preseason #1 for the very first time. You can't forget about Georgia, Alabama. They were, this close last year to getting there. Your LSU Tigers. Brian Kelly's been hyping up that defense. Yeah. Talk to me about the top group and how you see it as we head into the season.
Yeah, obviously, I think you hit some of the top teams there. You mentioned Texas and Georgia and Alabama and LSU. When you look at the coaches and the AP poll, those are the top teams. And you got some other teams that will be in the conversation, I think. And you got some that if they get good quarterback play, maybe, they are a team that can be the surprise team and be the 4th team from the SEC if they get 4 in the playoff this year. But if we stay with those teams, because I do believe those are the top teams, it's fascinating to me how when you look at the SEC, you look at Texas, you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama, those are really good teams, we think, but they're all starting new quarterbacks. And then you look at maybe the next tier. If that's the top tier, then you look at LSU, you look at South Carolina, Florida, even Oklahoma. Well, they got guys we know what they can do.
Yeah.
They got guys that are going to be Sunday players at that position. Which one of those wins out? Is it going to be Georgia and their defense and Kirby Smart, Alabama and their defense and, the running game, all these things, how are they going to – Texas has athletes all over the place surrounding Arch. They get their running backs back finally healthy there, but we don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. I think we know what Garrett Nussmeier is. I think we know what Lenora Sellers is, right? We know those players, and it's funny, the middle tier. And I think LSU's right there on the verge of being top tier, middle tier. And, Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a big reason for that. But is it going to be the quarterbacks that, elevate those teams to be in the top tier? Are the top tier teams not going to get great quarterback play? There's not and this is no disrespect to a Gunnar Stockton. If you want to cross the country, all 130 plus teams, do you want Lenora Sellers or Gunnar Stockton? They're going to go with Lenora Sellers, right? But how much can his teammates around him elevate his game? And does Georgia continue to do Georgia things, or is it the team with the quarterback? And that to me in the SEC is the storyline. It is the year of the quarterback in the SEC, good, bad, or indifferent, because there's no middleman. It's we either know exactly who their quarterback is or we have no idea. Even Vandy, we know who Vanderbilt's quarterback is, one of the most confident people you'll ever talk with. And
one of the biggest names actually in college football is the Vanderbilt quarterback. We love him.
right?
Love
I
him.
mean,
Yeah.
there's no in between this year. Like if we went, Ole Miss is starting over at quarterback, right? We don't know what Texas A&M and Marcel Reed for a full season. Tennessee starting over at quarterback. I can't remember a year, Nicole, where it's like you either got a dude or you got somebody that we don't really have any idea. Even Arch, we don't know. Like Arch's starts are against Louisiana Monroe and UTSA and Mississippi State. And I think he even came into the UTSA game late. So he got, 2 starts. And so we think Arch is going to be great. But the quarterbacks that we know are great, well, their teams aren't necessarily in that top tier. They're right there on the verge for some of them. So how that plays out is going to be fascinating.
I want you to tip your hand a little bit because I'm having you do picks like Joshua and I did for the Big Ten and the ACC. Do you believe that Arch Manning is going to be as good as we think he can be?
I don't know that anybody can be as good as much as we've talked about.
Okay,
Arch.
well, we don't need to give him the Heisman, but like, is he going to be a great college quarterback this season?
You know what's great about it? He doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to be. Like Texas has so much around Arch that's the thing. He doesn't have to be a Heisman frontrunner. Like now for South Carolina, if Lenora Sellers isn't in the Heisman conversation in November, they're disappointed because their season hasn't gone like they wanted it to. But when you look at Texas, you look at the defense, it's one of the best in the country. They've got maybe the best overall defensive player in the country. I think it's a 2-guy conversation. They got one of them. You look at what they get back at receiver. I know what they lost, but you and I, we knew who Matthew Golden was coming over from Houston to Texas. The average college football fan, they had no idea. He's a first-round pick, right? And so, like, they've got some guys that can elevate their play to that. I truly believe that. And then running back last year, they just went through so many different runs. The only SEC team, by the way, that returns a 1,000-yard rusher is Texas. And then they get some of those guys back healthy. So I think when you look at the roster around Arch, that's the beautiful thing. If you're a Longhorn fan, he doesn't have to be Peyton Manning. He doesn't have to be Eli Manning. He just has to keep them on track going forward, which all bets are he's going to do just that. And so, yeah, when you start looking at who he has to be compared to maybe what we've talked about him being, I think those are 2 different things.
Yeah. And the time we spent around him at SEC Media Days, by all accounts, everyone who spent time around him, like, he gets that.
Yes.
He is not treating himself any different than just a guy who's been waiting 2 years to get this opportunity to play. And so I buy in. I have them winning the SEC in my picks, just as a little teaser. We'll get to those in a second. I want to hit on hot seat coaches because there are a lot of them in the SEC. Part of that is because last year, people decided to be patient. You were walking into a house settlement world where all of a sudden you're going to maybe have to spend $20 million more from your athletic department budget to pay players. But we also saw some other decisions where, like, okay, Florida, they figured some stuff out at the end of the season. DJ Lagway has a ton of promise if he stays healthy, and he'll stay if Billy Napier stays, right? So you had like a lot of different decisions being made, as well as financial decisions. Like we did see a smaller carousel than usual because of these buyouts and things being prohibited. So let me run down all of the coaches that I'm putting on the hot seat question mark list. And you can start wherever you want, Hester. Sam Pittman at Arkansas, Billy Napier of Florida. Those are just carryover from last year. They both kept their job. Hugh Freeze at Auburn, who is 11-14 at Auburn. And remember, Brian Harsin got fired at 9-12. So just want to put that for context. Yeah. Got Brent Venables at Oklahoma here. And that's more of a question mark because I think we're going to see a step forward and see development. Mm-hmm. And then I'm putting Mark Stoops at Kentucky in here. I don't know if that's like his choice or it's just a long time and it's kind of fallen off at Kentucky. Right. But anyway, that's my list of potential hot seat coaches in the SEC. A, am I missing anybody? And B, whose seats are hottest?
I don't think you're missing anybody. Kind of want to look at this list. And when you started asking the question, these are kind of the names that I came up with as well. And everybody's a little bit different. Like for Sam Pittman in Arkansas, if they have a win like they had against Tennessee last year and don't fall off a cliff, they're good. They're good. Yeah. That's just kind of what, like if you have big wins and you stay around bowl eligibility, that's good. Billy Napier in Florida, the expectation's a little bit different. Now, he kept 2 teams out of Atlanta last year. kept LSU, and he kept Ole Miss out of Atlanta. Then he beat a rival in Florida State. Then he wins a bowl game. So he bought himself some real equity when we already had him fired. I mean, we just assumed after that loss to Texas, okay, well, who's going to be Florida's next head coach? And so credit to him. That is so incredibly difficult, Nicole, to be able to hit reset in the middle of a season when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, and he did just that. And so he bought himself, I think, some equity even this year. And DJ Lagway did tell us at Media Day, like, Billy Napier is kind of the reason he's at Florida, like one of the biggest reasons. And so if you've got a star quarterback going into the third year, do you really want to chance that? I don't think they do. So if Florida, even with their schedule, if they go a very competitive 7-5, 8-4 with a big win, I think that's good enough. Again, I know Florida's expectation, it's incredibly high, but I think that will be okay if Billy Napier does that. Hugh Freeze, though, you got to win on the Plains. If you don't win, and I'm talking about like playing for championships win, like they don't wait very long at that place. That place has some of the highest expectations in the country, right, wrong, or indifferent. They just do. That is always going to be the case there. And they have run plenty of coaches out of town. And Hugh Freeze was thought to be a home run when they made the hire. He had won in the SEC. He won at Liberty. And he'd gone through some stuff personally, but now he was good to go, and he's coming down.
And just kind of like an offensive guru, right? So I feel like that's
he figured out Alabama, their biggest rival, when he was at Ole Miss. I mean, there was a lot of good things. It hasn't been good. It hasn't. Quarterback play has been bad. That's supposed to be the thing that he's the best at. And so, I mean, Auburn, you better go win some games. Don't lose to Baylor in the opening week. You do that, you know how that place is. I mean, it's going to be scorching hot. They could lose that game, and it's going to be so loud that it's going to be hard to, cover your ears. It's just going to be that loud. Like you're going to hear some of it. And that might be one where if you lose that game, I don't know that you can do any right the rest of the way.
That's where I am on that particular matchup because of where both those programs are. We're going to get to Baylor and the Big 12 in a little bit, but that place is, they have set and reset the bar on buyouts that they're willing to fundraise to pay to get rid of coaches. And
they tried to have a coup. They made up a coup to try to get rid of Brian Harsin. Like they literally made up a coup to get rid of a football coach.
Yeah. So nothing is off the table there. And I think there's a lot of questions on play calling, who's going to be at quarterback, how many quarterbacks are we going to see? And just a lot of questions on taking that step. It feels like I've seen two lines of thinking here that yes, like it's the hottest potential hot seat. And it could be a rough season. And then people being like, I mean, on those years with Hugh Freeze, when you think that way, it's when he like goes out and, wins 10 games, wins 11 games or something like that. So that one is, I think, the most interesting of the hot seat situations in the SEC. The bigger questions in this conference, I want to get to Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, because when we're talking about hot seat coaches, not that he's on the hot seat, but it behooved him to win some games this year and not lose, lopsided games to Oklahoma or don't lose to Vanderbilt. But like, what are your expectations? Year two, reunited with Ryan Grubb, Ty Simpson at quarterback. What are you thinking down in Tuscaloosa?
I think they'll have another solid year. I think they'll have another 9-3, possibly 10-2 type year. Here's the thing that we all have to understand. And Nicole, I know you do. You've done this long enough to know that Coach Saban and the run that he had doesn't happen. That never happens. That is the outlier, right? That is the GOAT of college football doing things that nobody else has done, right? And if you think that's going to get replicated, you're just foolish, because it might never happen again in college football. And even what Kirby and Georgia were doing, it's so impressive. But, they won 2 championships in a row. But I don't even think Georgia can get to the level that Alabama did. But the problem is when you've had it, you become spoiled. And look, I get it. I understand. You're winning all these games, you're winning championships. And if you have a season where you were one of the first teams left out of the playoff, that's not good enough. Okay. But it's a first-year coach replacing the greatest that we've ever seen. In my opinion, I'm biased. I play for Coach Saban, but his track record speaks for itself, right? And so you're number one. You should be happy that somebody like Kalen DeBoer took that job. You know how many coaches probably ran the other way saying, oh my gosh, there's no way I would touch that job. It's always, you want to be the guy after the guy. You never want to be immediately after the guy. Kalen DeBoer's record speaks for itself. They're going to win football games. In a 10-year period, they're going to win a national championship if he stays that long. Is it going to be 3 out of 7? 4 out of 7, however many Coach Saban was winning, and that consistency? No, but we're never going to see that again.
And I think especially in this era with the roster turnover,
everything like the playing field is as close to even as it's ever been. You're going to have this amount of money to spend. We're seeing schools that we didn't know have deep pockets. They've got deep pockets with 3 E's in the middle. They just
we will
Texas
talk
Tech.
about Texas Tech in a little bit. Yep.
So if he has a year where he goes 9-3, then he goes 10-2, and then he goes 9-3 again, then 11-1, that is going to be successful. You're in a very tough conference. You play against the best of the best. And so it might take a little time, but if I'm an Alabama fan, I just have to realize I got one of the best coaches in college football. I thought year one was actually better than I thought it was going to be. And you said it, I get Ryan Grubb back. That's my partner. That's my guy. That when we are going together, that's when the direction is going full speed ahead. And so they're going to have a solid year. Do I have them winning a national championship? I don't, but they're going to win games. Just relax a little bit.
Okay, I have 2 other quick SEC questions, then we'll get to predictions. How many SEC teams in the playoff this year?
I think it's going to be 3.
Whoa.
I think you're going to get 3 SEC teams this year.
Okay.
You thought I was going to say 4, didn't you?
I thought it was going to be 4 or 5. I mean, this is
no. I sound like going 5. Okay.
No. I don't think a 5th best team like in a conference has a real claim on playing for national championship.
That's why, like when you're talking about 24-28, and they're like 7 automatic. I'm like 7. If you got 7, you got teams that got 4 or 5 losses potentially if you go 7 deep. And so I think 3 right now. I can say with confidence they're going to get 3. And then the 4th, I think every year is going to be a complete wild card.
Yeah, it's going to be right on that cut line. That's what I think. I think, I know it's only 1 year of data, but 9-3 being kind of like right on the cutoff line as an at-large, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think we're probably going to see that this year. Last SEC question. Can Texas solve its Georgia problem? We thought they were going to beat them, or at least like we collectively, Vegas, they both times last year.
Yeah, I was in Atlanta at the championship game, and it felt like Texas controlled the narrative there, and it always felt like, oh, they're going to win. It's fine. And Georgia just didn't go away, and Gunnar Stockton came in the game and won it for them. So they've got a Georgia problem. I don't think there's any question. And this happens. Like teams have teams that they can't figure out sometimes. I've been a part of that. It happens. And until you get over that hump, it's always going to be something that's just right there, right on, like just in your brain. Like, do we have a Georgia problem? And then it becomes self-doubt, and you're like, oh my gosh, can we beat this team? And so when you look at Texas' schedule, it is very favorable as far as how it plays out in the SEC. Now they open up with, the defending national champ. So this isn't shade towards their schedule. I'm talking about the part they don't control. But it doesn't matter if you lose again to Georgia. Like that's the game. Like you have to win that game. I think if you win that one, everything changes for you. Then we're having the conversation: is Texas the new standard of the SEC?
Might be a little soon for that. I think you got to win a national championship for that. But yes, Georgia solved its Alabama problem. And now Texas needs to solve its Georgia problem. Let's get your picks. SEC champion, your offensive, defensive player of the year, and coach of the year. Tell me who they are and why, Jacob Hester.
All right, so we'll start off at the top. I do think that the Texas Longhorns will win the SEC championship game. I've actually got them beating LSU. I think when you look at where Texas is really good, I think no matter what the quarterback play is, and again, I don't think there's going to be like just fall off a cliff from Arch Manning, but even if he's not the best in the country or top 5 in the country, there's so many Jimmies and Joes around him, offensively, defensively, whatever. And they've got the best play caller in college football in Steve Sarkisian. He is not going to put Arch Manning in a bad situation. And so I do think this is the year that Texas goes and wins the SEC championship game. I've got them with the defensive player of the year as well. I think Anthony Hill Jr. is the only person that can be in the conversation of best defensive player in the country with Caleb Downs. I think he's the only one. It is a 2-man race, and he is that guy in that conversation. I used to say this Like if a linebacker is faster than me, okay, well, I'm stronger than him. It's going to be fine. If he's stronger than me, okay, I'm faster than him. It's going to be fine. If he's smarter than me, it doesn't matter. I'm faster. I'm stronger. But I used to play against a guy named Patrick Willis, Nicole. He was smarter than me, faster than me, and stronger than me. It was a bad trio for me to go against Patrick Willis. Anthony Hill Jr. has those things. He's always the fastest, the smartest, and the strongest on the field. He is so much fun to watch. And so I think he's without question the best player on the defense side of the football in the SEC. I do give the nod to Offensive Player of the Year to LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. How about this? I mean, you're number one as the starter, replacing the Heisman Trophy winner. You throw for over 4,000 yards in year number one, the second most in school history, Joe Burrow in 2019. That's year number one. I think the totality of his weapons this year are better than they were a year ago on the outside. You get your leading receiver, Aaron Anderson, back. Now, you don't have Mason Taylor, who is like the ultimate security blanket, but you go add a receiver from Oklahoma, one from Kentucky. You go get a tight end from Oklahoma, a tight end from Texas A&M. And so I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to just explode this year. I think he's the second best quarterback in the country behind Clemson's Cade Klubnik. So I got him Offensive Player of the Year, and I think he throws for like 4,300 plus yards and cuts down on the interceptions that he had a year ago. Coach of the Year, my guy, Eli Drinkwitz. I think we don't put enough respect. Now I say we, I'm talking about everybody that covers college football. We don't put enough respect on what he's done there the last 2 years. Double-digit win seasons, back-to-back years. I don't care who played in the Cotton Bowl for Ohio State against Missouri. Like, they went and won that game, and that was an impressive victory for Mizzou to beat a team with the guys that Ohio State has. And then last year, very quietly, double-digit wins. And, Nicole, you look at their schedule this year, they don't leave Como until October the 18th. I mean, the entire month of September, and actually they got a game coming up, and obviously not today, but next Thursday. So they start the season early, and they don't leave until October the 18th. They have to take advantage of that. They've got one of the most favorable schedules in the entire country, much less the SEC. I think Eli and Mizzou, they're going to win double-digit games again. And we always know Coach of the Year, it's not necessarily to the guy that's going to go win the conference. It goes to the coach. It's like, you know what? We didn't think you were going to be very good. Turns out you were kind of good, and so we're going to give you Coach of the Year. And I think that's going to be Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri.
It's a good call because they are not ranked to start the season.
I know.
And that was a big surprise, I think, despite the fact that 10 other SEC teams were ranked in the preseason poll. Okay, here are my picks for the SEC. I'm also riding with Texas. Some of my preseason estimations are for teams that have not proven that they can beat a certain other team. I went through this with deciding on Penn State, right? And trusting them in the Big Ten. Similar with Texas. I think, you can't do it until you've done it. And I think Texas is going to do that, or maybe not have to go through Georgia in Atlanta to win the SEC. But I think they'll do it. I think if they're going to win the SEC and they're starting the season as the preseason number one, and there's so much excitement and spotlight and everything on Texas, Arch Manning is going to be the Offensive Player of the Year in the league if that all happens. Defensive Player of the Year, I went with Dylan Stewart, who I love. I mean, South Carolina honestly has some of the best players in the league and most entertaining players in the league. Dylan Stewart was like on everyone's freshman All-America teams, 6.5 sacks, forced 3 fumbles. And he was just part of, wreaking havoc on opposing teams with Kyle Kennard. I enjoyed him. I think he could have another year like that. I think they're going to need him because the defense is a question mark. And I think if South Carolina is able to be fairly reliable on that side of the ball, Lenora Sellers has a big year. That's where we're going to be looking for a potential Defensive Player of the Year. Coach of the Year, I'm going with Texas A&M's Mike Elko because, to your point, it's all about expectations and overachieving whatever we think is possible. Well, with Texas A&M, there's been this, 8-4 kind of just ceiling for a long time, right? Like if you break through that, or if A&M is able to beat Notre Dame, I know it's not an SEC game, but it's all about changing the narrative. It's about winning big games for A&M. Now, can they figure out the quarterback position? Can the quarterback position stay healthy? Can there be a little bit more of those Mike Elko defenses that we know and love so well? I loved this hire for A&M because I think hiring a normal coach and a ball coach and someone who's really cerebral, really smart, is the right thing to do instead of a big name and promising, over-promising national championships.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see growth for Texas A&M. And again, I don't think they have to be world beaters, but I think you get a 1 or 2 big wins. Marcel Reed does dazzles in a couple key moments. I think that's enough to be like, okay, this is A&M. They're for real, and they're building something. This isn't a flash in the pan deal for A&M. So I go with Mike Elko. All right, let's switch pages. Let's go to the Big 12 Conference.
Yeah, here's where the chaos comes in. I'm ready for this.
This one is, so I was, setting up. We're like, okay, contenders tier. Everyone. I mean, this
Everybody.
is a conference where from top to bottom, they're closer than anybody else in college football. I saw so many different people make so many different picks for Big 12 favorites to win this conference. So here's what I wrote down. I said, everyone, ? Make sure to hit on Arizona State, Kansas State, Utah, Iowa State. And then I realized I kind of forgot Texas Tech there. So we got to throw them in there.
Yeah.
But really, this feels very wide open, as it often does. Even Arizona State coming off of the run that they had to the CFP and the way they won the league. I still like them. And I like Sam Levitt, and I like where they are. Everyone said last year, it was kind of a year early. So it was all building towards this season. But it's still so hard to win this conference back-to-back years because of the parity that I don't know how great I feel about Arizona State doing it.
There's going to be so much chaotic energy in this conference, and it is going to be week to week. You don't know what's going to happen, but I want to make sure that we tell everybody, not because there's not great teams, but because I think there's a lot of really good teams. I think there's 8 teams maybe truly that could win this conference. And so like from the top all the way to the bottom, it's got the most parity across the country. And I think every week you're going to be in a dogfight. Now, here's the problem, though. I think you're probably only going to get one team into the college football playoff because you're going to have 9-3 records everywhere. Everywhere's going to have a 9-3 record. Maybe you get 2 teams in. I'm not saying they don't deserve more, but I think because every week we just don't know what to expect, that they're going to beat up on each other. Now, I think Arizona State is really set up with a great foundation. I think Kenny Dillingham right now, when you look at what he has done in his coaching career, and also like that's home for him. And that means a lot. Like when you're home and you're from somewhere and you went to school somewhere, you might not, a lot of coaches think they're doing everything they possibly can, but when it's home, you are doing everything. You're like, hey, that one more meeting. I really want to go home. It's 11:30 at night, but I'm going to do that one more meeting because home means everything to you. And what he's done, like, Bo Nix, when he went from Auburn to Oregon, when Dillingham was the OC there, you covered the SEC as well. You know what the saying was about Bo Nix. It was good Bo and bad Bo. And it was more bad Bo than good Bo.
Couldn't play away from home, especially.
No question about it. And he was somebody that when it happened, we covered it a little bit. We didn't have a whole lot of fanfare with it. It wasn't like, oh my God, Bo Nix is going to Oregon. Bo Nix was, runner up to Jaden Daniels, rookie of the year in the NFL last year. The Broncos look completely different because of what he's done. And Kenny Dillingham, I think, is a large portion of why that is. And so I think the foundation there is better than anywhere else in the Big 12, but K-State and Iowa State, Farmageddon, which we're about to get, is incredible. Utah, we thought they were going to be really good a year ago. They weren't. What did they do? How did they bounce back? Post Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Colorado. I mean, there's so many intriguing storylines in the Big 12. I think if you gave us 15 minutes, I could take 4 teams, Nicole could take 4 teams, and we could give you a reason why that school is going to win the Big 12. And I think we could convince you because there's that much talent, there's that many good coaches, and the parity is just so good in that league that I cannot wait to see it play out. And it's the first one we get from the very jump street. We get Iowa State, K-State, which are 2 contenders.
Totally. Let's flip the order here because I do think the questions and the storylines are maybe more interesting than the hot seats in this league because of how many different things we're going to track.
Yeah.
Let's start with Texas Tech. We talked about them a little bit earlier in the show. They threw a ton of money at this program in the portal, in recruiting. They're trying to have the biggest, fastest, strongest team in the Big 12, believing that will set them up to beat most of the teams. And then, the acumen, the coaching acumen, the strategy, all of that helps you beat the best teams in the conference. Texas Tech has never won a Big 12 title. They are trying to do that. Obviously, if you do that, you go to the college football playoff.
Yeah.
But there has been such a concerted effort to give Joey McGuire everything that he possibly could have from a roster and personnel standpoint, from NIL standpoint, rev share, all of that. We saw this work. I'm going to bring up softball for a second because Najee Kennedy leaves Stanford to come to Texas Tech, become the first $1 million a year softball player. They are within a couple of runs of winning a national championship by doing this.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're going to do this, but we have seen the fruits of COTY Campbell and company's labor there.
Yeah.
Can Texas Tech do it with this roster? Like, do you believe? I mean, I think we all say, yes, they could win the Big 12.
Right.
Tell me why they could or why they won't.
All right. So just because you bring in a lot of talent and a lot of players that other schools wanted, it doesn't always mean it's going to work out. And there's a lot that goes into it. Like if we go look at some of the portal additions over the last 4 years, there's a lot of schools that add a lot of players and they don't, end up doing anything. They just don't. They're like middle of the road in their conference. Now there's some coaches that handle it extremely well. Now there's like Kenny Dillingham, who we just talked about. Like the first 2 years, he knew he had to do the deepest deep dive into the portal. He did. Now the foundation's set. Now it's about retention. Lane Kiffin does a great job of new year, new team. I think Jeff Brom does a great job. New year, new team. But that doesn't happen everywhere. There's plenty of case studies, I think, now of teams that have added 50, 60 players in the portal, and they haven't been very good. Now, there's higher end additions here at Texas Tech, and you love the way the schedule starts, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Kent State. All right, we're going to figure some things out, but what's that chemistry going to be like? Like, what is the top-end talent also? Like, you got a lot of players I think are good players. Do you have any elite players outside of Jacob Rodriguez at linebacker? What are you going to get from the quarterback position? So there's still plenty of question marks about Texas Tech. Just because you add this many players, it doesn't mean it's going to work well for you. Now, the schedule for them in the non-con, right, it's going to give them every opportunity. Or I think Oregon State is the third game of the year. Now, they got to go on the road to Utah. That's a very interesting game. On the road against Arizona State. So they've got some games in conference play. But watching them in the non-con is going to be about, okay, what's the chemistry like? Are they on the same page? Because when you add that many new players, everybody just assumes that it's going to work out. It's going to be day one. We're fine. Let's move forward. But there's some schools that handle it really well. There's some that haven't really done it before to this level. And so my question for Texas Tech is, you've got good, who's elite offensively. You've got 5-star, players that we've heard a lot about, but they haven't done anything. Can they do it in this season? So there's still a lot of question marks for me with Texas Tech. Again, if they win the Big 12 because of who they added, good on them. Wouldn't be surprised. But there's teams I had ahead of them because I think they know who they are. They know the identity of their team. And I still don't think Texas Tech knows that.
I think it's a great point. I think Oregon State is a really big inflection point. Not that, because if it's not a close game, like if they really figured it out and they are operating at a high level, I think that's when you start to take them more seriously, or answering some of the questions that we're posing here with them. You mentioned Deion Sanders. This is going to be his first year without Shedeur Sanders, without Travis Hunter. So two of the best players in all of college football. They had such an incredible turnaround. He's also going to be dealing with his health issues, which he's opened up about. But he was away from the program a lot, dealing with his bladder cancer this offseason. Yeah. So let's stick to football, though. We don't need to speculate about his health. Hopefully that he is feeling well, and that he's going to be able to do what he needs to do to continue coaching. From a football standpoint, they are certainly more talented now than when he took this job. Certainly have an identity of what they expect from their players and what they are looking for. But last year's team was so reliant on two players. It was like, let's just put as much as possible as we can on Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders and see how far it can go. Got them 9 wins. So what are your biggest questions for them and what they're going to look like?
I mean, it's life after those two players. Now, the roster from when Deion Sanders gets to Boulder to where it's at now, it's night and day. It's much better. That's the obvious statement. They were a bad football team and program before he got there, so they're in much better standing. I mean, the foundation of that program is really steady. They're good. They can build upon that. But for me to say you're going to be better than you were a year ago is hard. You had the best player in the country in Travis Hunter. He's a true unicorn. Nobody has really done what he's went out there and did over the last couple of years at receiver and corner. Okay. You had Shedeur Sanders, who is a NFL quarterback. I'm not here to talk about draft night and why he fell and should he. He's an NFL quarterback. He got selected to be a quarterback in the NFL. And so you've got, you got a transfer from Liberty who his best year was 2 years ago, not last year. Okay. So, and you got a true freshman. At that position, I don't always love that. I think it's the hardest position to play in sports. And when you're a true freshman playing in a league, it's going to be highly competitive. I don't know what that looks like. And you don't have Arkansas Pine Bluff the opening week like Texas Tech. You got Georgia Tech. And I know, and I want our listeners to know, when you play Georgia Tech, you feel that game the next Wednesday. You're in the cold tub the next Wednesday from playing Georgia Tech because Brent Key has given his identity and his demeanor to his entire team. We put together an all meathead team on off campus in the Phil Steele magazine. QB1, Haynes King. Like even the quarterback is a meathead, which I love. I cannot wait to watch Georgia Tech, but you can't half step if you're Colorado. Like if you half step into that game, you're going to get embarrassed by Georgia Tech, right? So like you got the talent to play and beat Georgia Tech, but you're starting a lot of new against a team that brings back a lot of the same guys. And so it's hard for me to say, look, again, the program is in great hands right now, but it's hard for me to say you're going to be better than you were a year ago when you lose a generational talent in Travis Hunter and a pro quarterback in Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions also at BYU, who lost their quarterback in a way that they did not expect, with Jake Retzlaff going over to Tulane after the moral code violation, honor code violation, and all that unfolded there. They are going to be an interesting team again with a great coach and a great ethos and identity, but questions there. And part of the reason that I don't necessarily group them in as a Big 12 contender at this point, I think they might have been my favorite had that all not happened. There's two programs as well that have really interesting storylines because they brought back a coach from their glory days. So you've got Scott Frost back at UCF and Rich Rodriguez back at West Virginia. I think the Rich Rod thing is really going to work. I think we've seen him win at places like Jacksonville State and Arizona, places that are really hard to do it. And I think like his style of play and the offense, the way he uses personnel, I think it going to work really, really well in the Big 12. I don't know about Scott Frost though, to the same extent. I think the world has changed a lot since he was at UCF last.
Yeah, good point.
And certainly the level of competition, but those are really fascinating storylines, the homecomings in this conference.
Yeah, I thought UCF was going to be much better than they were a year ago. And so like that roster, like by the end of the year, it was one that it was tough to watch. And so you're not taking over the UCF that, claimed the national championship in 2017, right? The last time you were at UCF, the roster was pretty good. You don't have that roster right now. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Scott Frost there in Orlando. I just don't have them doing anything, certainly in year number one. It's a place you can recruit to. He's done that before, but you can't just hit reset that quick and be back into the conversation again, because I think where the rest of the league is. But I agree with you with Rich Rod. I mean, he's one of the better play callers we have. Now, it's a different style, but it was a different style when they were having success. And it's still a different style now. Like there's a lot of people that try to replicate what he did over time, but his offense actually still plays in today's college football. And you mentioned Jacksonville State there. He had success as the coordinator at Louisiana Monroe, right? I mean, he was at the top. He was at the top there for a while at West Virginia. He goes to Michigan, doesn't work out. But I mean, there was a time period where we considered him one of the best coaches in college football. And he kind of refound himself throughout, the grind and going to the Sun Belt Conference and Conference USA and having to go that route. And I think he's in the place that he considers home now. And he's at a place that he knows how hard it was to get back to that place. And so I think West Virginia is going to be interesting. I don't have them winning the league. I don't have them being in the top four. But they're one of those teams where when they're on your schedule, you're going to have to circle them because they're going to beat somebody they shouldn't. They're going to be a real spoiler in the Big 12. And I think long-term, Rich Rod being at West Virginia, I'm not saying they'll be back to the Steve Slayton, Pat White days, but they'll be a team that 9-3, 8-4 consistently.
Yeah, I think so too. Hot seat in the Big 12. Not as long a list as the SEC as we enter the year. I think you've got to pay attention to Scott Satterfield, Cincinnati, 8-16 over 2 seasons. And they open with Nebraska, which is a dark horse CFP team, I think, for a lot of people. The more interesting hot seat situation, I think, is Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. Like we saw that come to a head after last season. They go 3-9. They're 0-9 in Big 12 play. we entered the season by Ollie Gordon. We were talking about all of this. He's largely a non-factor in the conference. The way they lost some of those games was really tough. And then there was a power struggle with the administration afterwards where we weren't even sure he was going to stay the head coach. He ends up taking a pay cut, restructured his contract, shook up his coaching staff. It's going to look very different, probably feel very different on a day-to-day basis for Mike Gundy right now because he's been at Stillwater forever. But that's one that I'm really intrigued by. If we don't see development, if you don't see like a big jump, I think, in the win total, does it come to an end? I mean, he's the winningest coach in program history, but you got to be able to adapt to where college football is today.
Yeah, I mean, there's, a lot of wins under his belt there. I mean, he takes over. So Les Miles leaves there and comes to us at LSU, right? And Mike Gundy takes that job. So he's been there since I played college football, Nicole. That was a very, very long time ago. And so he's had staying power and had a lot of success. And, they were, this close to playing for a national championship in 2011. And so they've had big moments there. And it's a program that has put a lot of resources, certainly in his time there and his tenure there. But a telltale sign of if a coach knows he's in trouble is wholesale changes. When a coach makes wholesale changes, he knows, okay, this is it. This is the last hoorah if I don't do A, B, and C. And so him like changing the staff and kind of changing the way they do things, he knows that. He feels that pressure. He knows he was probably like an eyelash away from being let go a year ago. And so when you have coaches that have this kind of tenure, you're going to give them, hey, here's that one more season. This is without question that one more season for Mike Gundy. And look, it's not even, trying to throw shade at him, but sometimes it runs its course. And sometimes the same voice over and over again, and it's not anything against that person. Again, he's had a lot of success in Stillwater, brought him to places they've never really been before. But like even talking, not just to the team changes, but talking to the boosters and talking to the people around the program, talking to the local media. Like when you have that voice since 2005, sometimes it's just, man, can we get something new in here? Unless you're winning, because if you're winning, that cures everything. So when you're not winning, those questions start to come into the program, and they certainly did very loudly a year ago. And I think they got to do something kind of special this year for Mike Gundy to be safe. Like they got to go 9-3 with some like big time wins and like be in the Big 12 title game conversation in week 11, week 12. If they don't do that, like I think 8-4 with like some bad losses, I think they're moving on and looking for a new head coach.
Yeah, they need to be on that website, that landing page where the Big 12 puts all their scenarios, because like they're really complicated and we need to watch them eliminate teams one by one. They need to be there. And again, for a example of just how long he has been there, we all remember I'm a man, I'm 40. He is 58 years old. It has been a long time since Mike Gundy has been in Stillwater.
That's a great point. So I just turned 40 this year, and I tell everybody that will listen, I'm in my Mike Gundy year because that clip was so great. I did not need to know that was 18 years ago, though.
18 years ago.
I did not need that information here.
It really was. All right. So Jacob Hester, let's get your picks. I'm putting you on the spot. This is the hardest league to make preseason predictions. So take it away.
All right, I'm going to go champion, the old Ric Flair. To be the man, you got to beat the man. Arizona State is the man. Even though they lost the meathead player of the year in Cam Scadaboo, the running back position is still in good hands. You go get a transfer out of Army who was a 1,000-yard rusher, so you're going to get that ultimate grit there at that position. Jordan Tyson, who did not play, as we all know, in that Peach Bowl against Texas a year ago, he might be the best overall player in the entire Big 12 conference. You get him back to pair him with my offensive player of the year in Sam Levitt. Sam Levitt is somebody that is going to have the ability, I think, to show you what he can do as a runner, because you don't have a Cam Scadaboo, and so the offense went through Scadaboo last year. I do think Sam Levitt, obviously with his arm, but with his legs, is going to do more this year. And again, Kenny Dillingham, he's like a quarterback whisperer. What he did with Bo Nix, I'll bring that back up because it's remarkable. So I do think Sam Levitt is going to be the offensive player of the year, just getting his main target back. Again, I think you're good enough at the running back position where you don't fall into tendencies as well. And I expect Sam Levitt to have a big, big year. Defensive player of the year is going to go to Texas Tech linebacker Jacob Rodriguez. This is somebody that's incredibly interesting because he started his career at UVA as a quarterback. So when I watch his tape and you go and you kind of watch the end zone copy, you're like, man, that guy's always in the right spot before the offensive player gets there. And you start to continue to do the research. It's like, okay, because he sees it as a quarterback. Like he entered college football as a quarterback, played a year at UVA as a quarterback. And so it makes a lot of sense. He is always in the right place. He's got all the tools. He's fast, he's big, he's strong, he's all those things. He's an NFL linebacker, but it makes so much sense because he sees the game differently than most linebackers. Look, I love a good neck roll wearing meathead linebacker. I do. It's like, hey, I'm going to go from point A to point B. I'm going to go fast and I'm going to get my job done. He doesn't have that mindset. Now he can get that done, but the way he sees it before it happens, you can tell this guy's got high level quarterback experience. And so I think he's going to have just, really big year for Texas Tech. And if they get to, a Big 12 championship game scenario, it's going to be because of Jacob Rodriguez. He's that good of a player. So excited to see how it plays out for him in Lubbock. And then coach of the year. I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in college football. I think last year was very disappointing for a lot of people. I was incredibly high. We all were incredibly high. I love Cam Rising, right? He is mean, nasty, and tough, but I do think he handcuffed that program a little bit. And he didn't try to. I'm not saying but he did, because he would be ready to go. They'd be all behind him and he'd get hurt. Now, he only knew one style of play, Nicole, and that's probably why he got hurt. He had no regard for his body, if you remember that Rose Bowl against Ohio State. But I really think it set the program back because they would put everything behind him, and then he'd get hurt and be like, oh, no, what do we do? Because Cam Rising was a different quarterback. He had his own unique skill set. And so you build an offense around that. Their backups didn't have the same skill set as Cam Rising. So when he got hurt, you had to change everything. And when you try to change everything in the middle of a season, beginning of the season, it doesn't happen that way. And then it just starts to roll downhill and you try to slow it down as much as you can. So I think they're in a better spot as far as they know who they are. They know what the identity of the team is going to be. And if they have an injury at quarterback, it's going to be a little bit easier to sustain because you don't have this unique Cam Rising figure back there at quarterback. And so I don't think they're going to win the league, but they were towards the very bottom of the league a year ago. I think they finished maybe in the top 4 of the league. And again, like we said, the guy that wins the league doesn't typically get coach of the year. It's the guy that either did bad a year ago, does good this year, or you didn't really think they were going to do anything, and all of a sudden they do. So for that reason, I think Kyle Whittingham does win coach of the year. He's too good of a coach to have bad back-to-back seasons.
Yeah, I like that pick. And then I'll also throw, not for hot seat watch, but potential retirement watch, which I also feel like we do every single year with Kyle Whittingham. They've even got a coach in waiting. My Big 12 picks are pretty similar. I also am going with Arizona State, even though I think it's very difficult in this conference to go back-to-back with the amount of parity. I do cling to what you said about, Jordan Tyson, but also that they were building towards this season. They got there a little earlier. I am curious how much, Cam Scatterbu was kind of like the lifeblood and the heart of the team, and how much was on his shoulders, what they look like without him. But I trust Sam Leavitt. I trust the offense. And I think that they're going to be able to at least be the one with the target on their back, because they figured out a lot of things and they figured out how to be in and win close games as well. I'm going with a different Texas Tech defender for my player of the year. I'm going with David Bailey. Now, I came over from Stanford. He was one of the biggest names available in the transfer portal. And I just think he's such an established and disruptive edge player. 22.5 tackles for loss, 14.5 sacks during 3 seasons at Stanford. I think he's going to be an impact player right away. I'm in on this Texas Tech defense for that reason and what you explained as well. So I think that if they are able to really dictate how these games go, we're going to be talking about a bunch of guys, a bunch of dudes on that side of the ball for Texas Tech, and that they could certainly get to that championship game. Coach of the year, I'm going with Dave Aranda at Baylor, because this is a program that people had, been disappointed in since Dave Aranda gets there. Certainly, the last couple of years. And, they are figuring some things out despite staffing turnovers. Remember the shirts that say we pay players now, they're doing some things in recruiting that they were not doing. And I think he is one of the most interesting coaches in college football. He's super cerebral, insightful. Conversations with him immediately turn into tangents. But I think he's figured some stuff out. And I think they're going to be a team that, again, it's about expectations. So you come off of a couple years we haven't really been talking about Baylor, and you do some things, you finish in the top half of the league, maybe in that top 4, top 5. And then we're talking about them. Also, we've mentioned this in the SEC preview. They play Auburn right out of the gate. So in terms of narratives of expectations, overachieving, all of that, we're going to see that right away with Baylor. If they win that game, I think it sets up well for a Baylor resurgence storyline for this season. Hester, before I let you go, we got to hit on the best of the rest. Outside of the Power Four, Boise State is ranked. They feel like the team that we're all kind of penciling in as our preseason pick to get the Group of Five champion spot. What are other teams you're watching, other storylines you're watching outside of the power conferences?
Yeah, so when I go to the service academies, I like Army and I like Navy. I think what they did last year was really impressive. Blake Horvath at Navy is like the jack of all trades type quarterback. I mean, he went against that Army team a year ago and kind of put the Navy on his back, and they went out there, they upset Army. And so I know Army starting over at quarterback and running back, but I think Monken's one of the best coaches in the country. So I think they'll be in the conversation. I certainly think Navy is going to be in that conversation. If you don't know who Blake Horvath is, just do some research. You'll fall in love with him. So I like those two service academies. I think Tulane's always going to be in the mix. Obviously, you go get a big-time quarterback from BYU. We'll see if he can start the season as the starter, considering how late he got there. I think Louisiana Lafayette's interesting. But if I'm picking a team out of the group of six to kind of challenge Boise State, I think UNLV. I think Dan Mullen is somebody that Florida fans couldn't wait to get out of town, but it's like, hold up, wait a minute. He went to like 3 New Year's Six bowl games. They almost beat that Alabama team that a lot of people put as one of the best in the last 15 years in college football in 2020. He did a lot of good there at Florida. And then you saw when he left, I mean, obviously Billy did a lot last year at the end of the year, but from Dan Mullen to what Billy Napier had done to that point, there wasn't a lot of good there in Gainesville. I think Dan Mullen's a hell of a football coach. The first ever college football playoff ranking, he had Mississippi State as the number 1 team in the country. Nicole, you know how hard that is to do. They've been playing football for a long time there at Mississippi State in Starkville. They've never had anything like that.
I visited. That was my first time in Starkville that week when they were number 1 in the country.
Yeah, like nobody thought they'd ever be number 1 in college football, but he gets them to that point. He can coach football at a very high level. Now, recruiting, and I know Florida fans want to talk about that. He has his own way of recruiting. He likes to find the diamond in the rough, the 3-star guy, and turn him into a star. I think at a place like UNLV, you can go get some really good 3-star players. You got a lot to recruit to. They were good a year ago. Now the coaching staff goes to Purdue, but Dan Mullen's going to win a lot of games at UNLV. And if they made the college football playoff, do not be shocked.
I like that pick too, because what Barry Odom did there was something that had not been done there for like 20 years, right? 1 bowl game in 20 years. And then all of a sudden they are contending in the Mountain West. They are close to the college football playoff. And there's really no reason that UNLV should drop off from that. They have the resources. They are in a city that is such a hub of all sports, all these pro teams trying to get there. And there's just a lot of reasons that they should be super relevant in college football today. And I like that hire of Dan Mullen. I think he thought he was great on TV. Like I thought he was really good about talking about football. So I'm with you on that. And it feels like whoever gets the best, kind of like last year between UNLV and Boise, is going to be the front runner for that playoff spot.
Yeah, I think, obviously those teams, and they played each other, and last year was competitive. I mean, those games were competitive. Ashton Genty ends up taking over those games, but yeah, UNLV is going to be in a great spot. I think there's plenty of teams. James Madison, we didn't talk about them. Memphis can be into this conversation. It's what makes it so exciting to have, those teams represented in the playoff with an opportunity, because there's some really good football teams that deserve to be in the conversation. I will say this one thing that we didn't get a chance to get to, because I know we were talking about the Big 12 and the SEC, because we talked about Caleb Downs a little bit there being the best player in the country on defense. I don't know how you feel, but I sit here and I think about like all the teams that we talk about, and Ohio State doesn't get talked about a lot. I'm like, let's not forget they won the championship last year. They've got the best player in the country on offense, the best player in the country on defense. And I feel like that's a team that at least like when I do the show over on 84, like we want to talk about everybody else, even teams within the same conference as them, how much different that conversation is for Ryan Day now and this year compared to what it's always been. He's probably like enjoying the fact that nobody's picking them or talking about them. And what was Penn State the media pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the Big Ten to win the league?
I think so. Yeah, I think they were second. And
so
yeah, I think everyone's just like, all right, totally different team, right? Like hands up. We'll see.
How do you lose 14 players to the NFL draft and you still got the best player on offense and defense in the country? It's remarkable.
Listen, this is music to Joshua Perry's ears, so he will enjoy this, I'm sure.
Look,
it's some sort of like 2 a.m. feeding.
I know he had to miss today because he's got more important things with the birth of a child, but I felt like I had to give the Buckeyes some love in his absence here.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll wrap things up there. We have made it very quickly through all of the power conferences, and we hit briefly on the group of 5 and group of 6. So rushing the field is back to its normal schedule. We'll have it is a game week with week 0, but it's a true game week next week with week 1. Jacob Hester, thank you so much for popping in and filling in for JP. We appreciate you. Listen to you every day on SiriusXM, channel 84, 3 to 6 Eastern off campus, Meathead Radio. And I appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you soon, my friend.
Of course. Anytime you need me, let me know.
All right. So for Joshua Perry, for Jacob Hester, I'm Nicole Auerbach. Thanks for listening to Rushing the Field, and happy game week. Real college football this weekend and next. Cannot wait. We'll talk to you soon.